So I've got a good feeling for the sort of things that you need to think about when you want to become rich. In today's video, we're going to focus on these sort of rules that I've put in place. And honestly, I think if somebody could have told me all of these things 10 years ago, I'd be so much further on than I am today. So guys, before we get into the video, if you give it a big like, subscribe to the channel. Remember, I don't upsell anything on this channel, and because of that, I can give you all this information completely free of charge and completely impartial. I don't need to hold anything back. And remember, every month, we're going to be giving away cash from our subscriber dividend portfolio, where we put money in every month and buy index funds, and then we give the money to our subscribers so that you guys can get rich and see the process working as we go along. So guys, let's get into the video and let's start talking about these points about how I think people need to think in order to become rich. Now, the first thing that's on here is don't buy things you want. Buy things that pay for what you want. And what I'm really saying on this is don't waste money on luxuries. Don't try and look rich. You know, designer brands are quite often only for the middle class. Most people I know that are wealthy, you wouldn't know it by the way they dress. Now, that's not to say they don't buy expensive clothes, they do, but it's not covered in Louis Vuitton branding and it's not covered in Chanel stuff. It's generally quite understated. So that takes care of the don't buy things you want kind of side of things. But what do I mean by buy things that pay for what you want? Well, if you're buying assets that are going to generate cash flow for you, then you can use that cash flow in perpetuity. Let's use a good example of an index fund. Let's say, for example, you bought an index fund that pays out at 5% a year. Now, that income is going to come in every year for the rest of your life. It will, of course, fluctuate with markets. It might go up and it might go down, but it's going to pay you every single month or every single year, depending on the fund. Now, because that money's investment income in my life, I can then use that to buy the things I want. So if I want to go out for meals, or if I want to go out for weekends away or anything like that, we use money that's come in completely passively from our investments to pay for it. And we never, at the current state of our affairs, we never used any earned income for anything we want. We use that for the essentials. All the wants are taken care of by our passive income. Now, number two, remember £100 saved is not equal to £100 earned. Tax and opportunity cost are everything. So people quite often talk about the tax on money when you're saving money versus earning money, and that's quite simple to get your head around, isn't it? So if we earned £100, we would have to pay, as a lower rate taxpayer, 30%. That's 20% in tax and then 10% in NI, so we would only end up with 70. So if we saved £100 though, we saved the entire £100. So that's easy to get our head around, isn't it? £100 saved is worth 100, whereas £100 earned is worth 70. But what about the opportunity cost of saving that money? By not buying those other things, you could also invest that money. So what does £100 become worth over a lifetime, let's say? Let's say, for example, you're 20 years old, and that £100 is going to work for you as a soldier, earning you money for the next, 45 years up until you're 65. How much is that £100 worth? Well, let's do a compound interest calculation and find out. So that £100 is actually worth £8,800. I mean, that's an incredible return on the £100 saved. So opportunity cost, the amount of money you could make out of money, is incredibly important to always bear in mind. £100 saved is not equal to £100 earned. Tax and opportunity cost are everything. And for me, the biggest part of that is opportunity cost. If I put that money to work, how much will it be worth for me in the future, and how will that pay me dividends? Now, that £100 could pay you at 5% and grow at 3 or 4% a year if you went for a high income dividend fund, and that way you'd be getting £5 a year, growing over time every year for the rest of your life. I mean, that's a huge amount of income over your lifetime. So £100 saved is not the same as £100 earned. Number three, investing and gambling. I like this one, it's very topical. Investing and gambling can look the same, but you've got to understand the difference. I like the saying, I can understand bullshit in many different languages. And I think when you first start out, you need to sort of apply some rules to how you can decide whether you're investing or gambling. Now, I think a really good way of knowing whether you're investing or gambling, if you're just beginning, is probably to look at, are you going to get paid cash flow? Is there a residual income coming to you? So let's say, for example, you bought an index fund. Does it pay dividends? If it pays dividends, you're probably investing. If you bought a property, does it pay rent? Does rent get paid to it? If the rent comes in and then that pays your mortgage and leaves you with some left over, are you going to be better off? Probably. And this ties in quite nicely to my next point, where capitalism rarely allows a plus 20% net margin on a yearly basis. You know, that's a very rare thing for capitalism to allow. When the growth looks like it could be 400,000%, and if you compounded that up for 3 years, you'd have all the money in the world. Is it possible? Probably not. And I think at that point, you're probably gambling. So I think understanding the difference between investing and gambling, and it's for you to make those decisions, but I think it's very key. Vegas is full of people losing money, and you've got to make sure that you're in the right camp when it comes to investing and that you're not simply gambling with your money. So I've kind of already touched on the next point, which capitalism rarely allows massive margins. It also very rarely allows massive growth, right? It's unlikely you're going to be able to put £100 into something and it's going to pay you £100 every month. It's very likely what you've just heard is a pyramid scheme or a Ponzi scheme. And at some point, someone's going to cut and run and take all the money. So understand what margins are actually allowed. And generally, 20% margins are very, very healthy business. Most businesses operate between 10, 12, 13%, something like that. Certainly in my experience, in the businesses I've been involved, 10 to 20% is about the maximum most businesses get out. There are some exceptions, of course. However, capitalism doesn't really allow for it, because once the margins are high enough, other people come in and start producing that product or that service and drive the price down. Number 5, do not lose money. Remember, risk in the saying, more risk, more reward. It should actually be written, more risk, more potential reward, because you're taking on the risk as a definite. When you're looking at these things, you've got to understand that calculation. More risk equals more reward is very, very misleading. It's more potential reward. The risk is guaranteed. The risk is what you're buying into. The reward is potential. So if I'm looking at more risk, more potential reward, I put a higher weighting on the risk. I think it was Warren Buffett said, do not lose money is rule number 1, 2, and 3. Do not lose money. So in my opinion, more risk equals more potential reward, and if you start saying that to yourself and understanding that the reward is only potential, you can avoid some potentially really disastrous investment decisions. So guys, this is what I think that people need to be understanding if they want to sort of think like the rich. The rich do not buy things they want, they buy things that pay for what they want. They live on passive income, they live on dividend income, they live on the value of their stock, which they borrow against. They live on things that are paying for what they want. They do not spend earned income. Remember, £100 saved is not equivalent to £100 earned. Tax and opportunity are everything. Again, if we invested that £100 over a lifetime, it'd be worth £8,500 or just over £8,500. Now, if I gave you £100 and said, here's 8.5, which would you prefer? You can take the 8.5. Now, the only difference is time, and time is a factor in all of these things. I understand that. You know, I understand the urgency of wanting to go on that date, but if you can invest and get things that are paying for what you want, you can go on that date every month for the rest of your life. Investing and gambling, they look the same sometimes. Make sure you understand the difference. Margins that are massively high quite often aren't, and do not lose money. More risk is more potential reward, not definite reward. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, and if you've got any comments, put them down below and I'll make sure that I answer every single one of you. Cheers guys.